In this story, there's no science fiction, no made-up aliens, no Hollywood plot twists. What you're about to hear actually happened. And to this day, people are still arguing about what really went down. So, let's dive into one of the most mysterious and chilling cases in the world of unexplained phenomena. The abduction of Betty and Barney Hill. It was 1961. Betty and Barney Hill, husband and wife, were driving back from a trip near the Canadian border. Their dog was with them, curled up in the back seat. The road was quiet, calm. They'd had a wonderful vacation, and now they were heading home to New Hampshire. Everything felt normal until they got home. That's when things took a very strange turn. They realized there were 2 full hours missing from their trip. Gone. Completely erased from their memories. Like someone had pressed pause on time itself and then hit play again. But that wasn't the only thing. Their clothes had strange marks on them. Their car had bizarre scratches, dents, and no explanation. A few days later, Betty started having nightmares, night after night. Visions that were both surreal and terrifying. Barney, on the other hand, was gripped by waves of anxiety and an unshakable feeling of fear. No reason, no logic, just dread. Finally, desperate for answers, they turned to a psychiatrist. The doctor suggested hypnosis, a series of deep, guided sessions to unlock whatever their minds were hiding. And slowly, piece by piece, the missing hours came back. But what they remembered was beyond anything they could have imagined. Strange beings, a silent craft hovering in the night sky, medical examinations with tools and machines that, well, no human had ever built. And while there are plenty of people out there who claim they've met aliens, the Hill's story was different. So detailed, so consistent, that it became one of the very first documented alien abduction cases, complete with descriptions of the beings, how they communicated, and the way they treated their captives. Decades have passed since that night, but the question still hangs in the air. Was it real, or is there another, darker truth that's never been revealed? Now listen closely, for the details make the story. Barney Hill was born in 1922 in Virginia, the second of 4 children in a modest family. He joined the U.S. Army, served in the brutal grind of World War II, then went on to finish college, get married, and have 2 children. But everything changed in 1957. That was the year he met Betty, the woman who would become the center of the strangest, most terrifying experience of his life. Betty, born in 1919, was 3 years older than him. At the time, Barney was still married, but a powerful connection sparked between them, one that would eventually lead him to divorce. This was an era when interracial relationships were frowned upon, met with whispers, stares, and outright disapproval. But Betty didn't care. Neither did Barney's family. And on May 12, 1960, they were officially married. Barney worked for the Postal Service, often spending long hours away from home. So, to make it up to Betty, he promised her a short trip to Canada, a sort of make-up honeymoon they'd never had. In September of 1961, they packed up the car, brought along their loyal dog, Delcy, and set off for Niagara Falls, then Toronto and Montreal. It was a beautiful trip, full of scenic views and happy memories. But when news broke of a hurricane moving toward the area, the couple decided to head home early. On the night of September 19th, as they passed through the White Mountains, darkness had swallowed the road. The forest on either side loomed in silence, broken only by the glow of their headlights cutting through the night. The air was calm, peaceful, until everything changed. Barney kept his focus on the road, while Betty gazed out the window, her eyes wandering over the rolling mountains and the blanket of stars in the clear night sky. And then she saw it. A single point of light, moving in a way that didn't seem right. At first, she thought it was just a shooting star, but the movement was off. It wasn't falling. It was shifting, erratic, and it was getting bigger, closer. She asked Barney what he thought it was. He suggested maybe a satellite, drifting out of orbit, but Betty wasn't convinced. She wanted to stop, to get a better look at this strange object, and to give Delcy a chance to stretch his legs after hours in the car. Barney hesitated, but eventually pulled over by a dense patch of forest near a place called Twin Mountain. They got out, and Barney reached for a small pair of binoculars, and there it was, hovering in the night sky, growing clearer with every passing second, as if whatever it was deliberately, carefully moving toward them. At first, the view wasn't entirely clear. Barney kept insisting. What they were seeing was nothing more than a satellite gone off course. But the moment they focused through the binoculars, the truth began to take shape. And it was nothing like the simple explanations they'd been clinging to. That glowing object, it wasn't a meteor. It wasn't a satellite. It looked circular, like a disc-shaped craft, unlike any airplane they had ever seen. It glowed with an intense white light, rotating slowly as it descended, not falling, but sliding down through the air in a strange, unnatural way. It came lower, until it was barely higher than the tops of two trees. And that's when the shock hit them. A massive metallic object, just hanging there in the sky, completely still, no sound, no rush of air, as if the laws of physics simply didn't apply. Fear gripped Barney. This wasn't just strange, it was dangerous. He decided to get out of there. Now. Maybe it was some kind of secret military test, and if they got too close, they might not live to talk about it. But before he could get away, the craft moved. It changed direction, instantly, heading straight for them. It dropped down fast, blocking the road ahead, hovering just a few yards above the car. Suddenly, blinding lights burst from underneath, flooding the entire area, turning the night into a haze of white glare. Barney kept the engine running. His hand went to the dashboard and came back holding a .32 caliber pistol. He stepped out slowly, one cautious step after another, approaching the enormous craft, trying to make sense of what he was looking at. And then he froze. Through the craft's windows, he saw them, nearly 10 figures, gray-skinned, staring straight at him, not human, not even close. Their eyes were huge, unblinking, and it felt as though they were looking straight into his mind. Then, without warning, a section of the craft opened. Something slid out, a metallic device moving like some kind of mechanical arm. Barney's instincts screamed. He spun around, running back to the car, shouting, "We have to get out of here! Before they catch us!" He floored the gas. Betty, still trying to process what she'd seen, had no idea who or what Barney was talking about. And then, it hit them. A strange sound, a metallic buzzing tone, like the ring of a giant tuning fork, drilling into their ears. At the same time, they felt it, vibrations, running through their bodies, even though they were still inside the car. Slowly, their strength drained, their vision blurred, their minds faded into darkness. And then, nothing. No one knows how much time passed. But when they came to, the sound was gone. The vibrations, gone. They looked around, and the shock came again. They were on a completely different road, almost 40 miles from where they'd last been. And worse, it was now after midnight. Yet the blackout had started before 10:30 p.m. 2 full hours, gone, completely erased from their memories. Still reeling, they drove on in silence, reaching home around 5 in the morning. But this was not the end. It was only the beginning. The first thing they did was check the car, thinking maybe they'd been in an accident, knocked unconscious. But there was no damage, not even a scratch. Then they noticed something stranger. Both of their wristwatches had stopped. At the exact same time, down to the very minute. They stared at each other, a mix of shock and dread. This was no dream, no illusion. Inside, the silence was heavy. They left everything in the car, but the moment they looked at their clothes, the unease deepened. Barney's outfit was a mess, as if someone else had dressed him. His shirt ripped across the top, his underwear disheveled. Betty's dress, torn in several places, not jagged tears, but clean, precise openings, like surgical incisions, and on the fabric, a strange pink powder, fine, clinging, from a source they couldn't begin to guess. What was this powder? Why were her clothes cut in such a deliberate way? No one had an answer. Once Barney and Betty had caught their breath from the shock of that night, they wasted no time. They contacted the nearby Air Force base, hoping someone could track the strange object, spot it on radar, or at least confirm it had been following them. But as they feared, their report was brushed aside. The story sounded too bizarre, too unrealistic, and worst of all, missing key details. Details they simply couldn't remember. Still, deep down, both of them knew what happened wasn't a random event. It wasn't their imagination. That feeling only grew stronger the next morning, when they went out to inspect the car again. That's when they noticed something strange. On the surface of the trunk were small, shiny circles, each about the size of a coin. They hadn't been there before, and they gleamed in a way that just didn't seem natural. So they tried a little experiment. They brought out a compass and moved it close to the spots. And instantly, the needle began spinning wildly, as if some invisible force was twisting the magnetic field itself. Right then, they knew. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't a trick of the mind. Something real had happened to them. But for now, they kept it to themselves. Better that than risk being called crazy, or worse, becoming a joke. But silence didn't stop the torment. Over the days and months that followed, Betty suffered night after night of terrifying nightmares. She'd wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, with visions of strange places and medical procedures unlike anything she'd ever known. Her dreams hinted at those 2 missing hours. Hours she could never recall when awake. Barney wasn't spared either. Despite his constant denial, the same nightmares began to haunt him. He'd wake in fear, only to push it all down, refusing to believe what he'd seen. But the stress began to tear at him, until it became crippling anxiety that made daily life nearly impossible. Betty, on the other hand, was certain. What they'd lived through was real. And when Barney refused to talk about it, she broke the silence, telling a coworker about that night. Her friend suggested she start writing her dreams down, every detail, every image. hoping she could piece together the truth. But soon, the story consumed her thoughts. She began scouring libraries for anything on UFOs or alien encounters. That's when she found a book by Donald Kehoe, a well-known author and head of the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. She decided to write him a long letter, detailing everything she and Barney had gone through. But the letter never made it to Kehoe directly. Instead, it landed in the hands of Walter Webb, an astronomer and a member of the committee. When he read it, he knew there was something here worth looking into. He asked to meet the Hills in person. Barney resisted at first, but eventually agreed. During the meeting, they told Walter everything. From the moment they saw the strange light, to the second they lost consciousness. From the start, Walter could feel it. They weren't making this up. They weren't chasing fame or headlines. And his conviction grew even stronger when he learned that the committee had recorded a sighting of an unidentified object in the same area, on the very same night and time the Hills described. Still, the official conclusion was, what they'd seen wasn't necessarily an alien craft. It could have been an optical illusion, a rare atmospheric event. Of course, that explanation didn't sit well with Betty or Barney. They both knew what they'd lived through was far beyond a trick of the eye. 2 years passed. 2 years of nightmares. 2 years of anxiety. 2 years of living with something they couldn't explain. Until finally, they decided it was time for help. Real help. They searched for specialists and found one of the most respected names in the field at the time, psychiatrist Dr. Benjamin Simon. In their first session, they spoke generally about their symptoms, but the story was so strange, so unlike anything he'd heard before, that doctor. Simon made a decision. From here on, the sessions would be separate. Each of them would speak freely, without influence from the other. And, most importantly, he'd see if their accounts actually matched. The sessions began. One after another, each of them described what happened that night. From the first sight of the strange light in the sky to the moment they blacked out inside the car. They described the craft, its movements, and the appearance of the beings inside. And here was the shock. Their stories matched perfectly, down to the smallest detail. Dr. Simon began to wonder, could this be something far more real than anxiety or imagination? After reviewing the sessions, he concluded that their recurring nightmares were the result of a traumatic, real event that took place during those missing 2 hours. Their conscious minds had blocked the memory, but their subconscious had never let it go. And the best way to bring it all back was hypnosis. Hypnosis. What Barney and Betty went through wasn't anything like what you see in the movies. It wasn't just the doctor saying sleep and poof, they're out cold. No, it was way deeper than that. This kind of hypnosis is really a state of intense mental and physical relaxation. The doctor gets you to focus on one single thing, shutting out every distraction around you. It's a way of diving straight into the deepest parts of the subconscious, a technique often used to treat chronic anxiety, trauma, or to pull back memories buried so deep you can't reach them when you're fully awake. That's exactly why Dr. Simon thought it was perfect for Barney and Betty's case. The memory they'd lost hadn't really disappeared. It was still there, buried far down in their subconscious, locked away somewhere their conscious minds couldn't get to. So the sessions began, each of them in a separate room, so there'd be no crosstalk, no influence on each other's memories, and every single word they spoke was recorded, second by second. 6 months. 6 months of steady, relentless sessions, until Dr. Simon finally reached the most disturbing and bizarre part of the story: the missing time. The moment they'd felt those strange vibrations inside the car, they'd tried desperately to get away. But something was wrong. It was like their bodies just stopped working. Their minds were awake, but they couldn't move a muscle. The exact feeling you get in those nightmares where you're screaming or running, but your body refuses to respond. And then, while frozen in that terrifying state, they saw them. 5 strange figures stepping down from the craft, moving toward them through an intense light that cut straight through the dark. They all looked the same: gray skin, blue-tinged lips, huge black eyes, short, maybe 5 feet tall, long arms, dressed in blue uniforms, and wearing caps that looked oddly like something from a military academy. 2 of them grabbed Barney, 2 others grabbed Betty, and the 5th took the dog, Delcy. Fighting back was useless. Barney tried to plant his feet, but they dragged him anyway, which explained the tears in his shoes when they got home. Betty could only scream, "Barney!" And then, something she never expected happened. One of the creatures repeated the name in a strange, uneven voice. "Bar. Nay?" Then asked, "That his name?" She froze. Did it understand her? The same creature spoke again, in a weirdly calm tone. "Do not be afraid. We will run some tests only. If you cooperate, you will return as you are." No harm, they were led into the craft. Inside was a massive hall glowing with a blue fluorescent light, but not like any light they'd ever seen before. This one cast no shadows at all. It seemed to radiate from every inch of the place. They walked down a long corridor lined with doors, until each was taken into a separate room. They were laid on metallic tables, their arms, legs, even their waists, strapped down. Then one of the beings came in, the one Betty would later call the Examiner. His English was broken, but he explained they'd be running some basic tests, and if they cooperated, it wouldn't take long. And then, the exams began. They checked their eyes, their hands, their feet, their hair, their teeth. They took samples: hair, nails, saliva. They used strange metallic devices on their backs, something that seemed to scan their spines. And then came the worst part. A long, thick needle inserted right into Betty's stomach, through her navel. She screamed in agony. It felt like being stabbed with a knife. But then, one of the beings placed his hand gently on her head, and instantly, the pain was gone. After the exams were over, the one who seemed like the leader of the group walked up to Betty, giving her a slight nod, almost like he was trying to calm her down. Betty took the chance and asked, "Who are you? Where did you come from? And why are you doing all this?" He reached over to a small shelf inside the room and pulled out what looked like a chart. A bunch of dots spread out, connected by different types of lines: thick lines, thin lines, dotted lines. Then he started explaining. "The thick lines show the trade routes we always travel. The thin lines go to places we visit sometimes. The dotted ones are for exploration trips. And the trip we're on right now is one of those." Betty asked in shock, "Which dot is yours? Which one is your home planet?" He calmly pointed to the chart. "Can you find your planet here?" She shook her head. "Then I can't tell you ours either." Betty asked if she could have something, anything, to prove she'd been through this. The leader reached to another shelf and handed her a strange book filled with symbols she didn't understand. She clutched it tight. But minutes later, she saw him talking with the others at the door. When he came back, his tone had changed. "It's time for you to go back. But you should know, once you leave here, you'll forget everything that happened." Betty frowned. "You never told me that before." He sighed. "At first I didn't agree, but the rest of the team decided this was the right way, and I had to go along with it." Then he reached out and took the book back from her. A new group of those beings came in and escorted Betty, Barney, and even their dog, Delcy, back to the car. The moment they stepped inside, that deep humming sound filled their heads again. Their vision blurred. Their bodies went limp, and just like that, they remembered nothing. When Dr. Simon finally heard the full story, he couldn't wrap his head around it. Flying ships, gray-skinned beings, it all sounded crazy. But the thing he couldn't deny was how perfectly Betty and Barney's accounts matched, down to the tiniest details, with no contradictions. Every hypnosis session had been recorded, over 11 hours in total. In one of them, Simon even asked Betty to draw the star chart she'd seen on board. She did it perfectly. Simon kept that drawing as rare evidence. Afterwards, the couple finally felt like the nightmares had stopped. That's where the story should have ended. But one day, at church, during an emotional moment, they shared their strange experience with a few people, thanking Dr. Simon for helping them. What they didn't know was that someone was secretly recording them. Days later, the recording landed in the hands of a Boston Traveler reporter. The moment he heard it, he was hooked. He tried to get an interview, but the Hills refused. They wanted the story to stay private. He didn't care. Without their permission, he published articles detailing their experience. The problem? A lot of what he printed was wrong. Frustrated, Betty and Barney decided to break their silence. They went public, telling the real version themselves. From there, the story exploded. Reporters, scientists, UFO researchers, everyone wanted to hear it. The media circus had begun. Investigators even asked for the dress Betty wore that night. They sent it to multiple labs, and the results were shocking. Traces of a strange pink substance. It was organic, made of proteins and oils, but no lab could identify it. Nothing like it exists on Earth. As for Betty's star map, astronomers studied it and found it closely matched the Zeta Reticuli star system, about 39 light-years away, one of the closest to Earth. All of this led Betty and Barney to publish their story in the famous book, The Interrupted Journey. Over time, their description became the template for the classic alien image we all picture today. Their story inspired movies, TV shows, and sci-fi magazines for decades. Still, like any unbelievable tale, some believed it, others dismissed it as a dream or hallucination. But the strangest part? Even now, no one has been able to prove it was fake, or prove it was real. And that's how we close one of the most famous alien abduction cases in modern history. If you liked this story, wait until you hear about the Battle of Los Angeles, a mysterious, well-documented encounter with UFOs, or the real truth behind Roswell. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Until next time, for another story that's stranger, deeper, and maybe closer to you than you think.